Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of Indexer Office Hours. Today is the 23rd of May and this is IOH 108. If anyone is new to Indexer Office Hours, I see a few new faces. This is the town square for graph ecosystem participants to come together and to discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexers. This is the conversation, and by that token, we love participation and would love to hear your voice. You can either contribute to the conversation via voice or text. And if you're having any issues unmuting your mic, let me know and I can try to get you sorted out. And just as a reminder, this is recorded and will be published onto public channels like YouTube. So if you're concerned about privacy, please bear that in mind. And with that, let's get into today's agenda. So I kick off usually with opening remarks. And in that section, I give a shout out to 𝗨𝗂𝗳𝗂𝗟𝗶. And this podcast episode is 117 with 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂𝗂. And in this particular episode, Nick had a discussion with Lauren, and she is a significant contributor for many years across multiple projects in the crypto space. She has a background as a blockchain strategist and consultant at Deloitte. She also worked at Consensus. I also worked at Consensus, so that's quite cool. And she has a very interesting and varied background where she talks a bit about how she kind of came into the crypto space. And more specifically, she speaks about what she's founded, which is Collective Works. And so if you're interested to hear about her story and the project that she's running, please do check out the link. I will go ahead and grab a link just so all of you can check it out. Bear with me 1 second. There it is. So please do check out that podcast episode if you're interested. And with that, I will hand over to Anna, who's going to take us into our regularly scheduled Repo Watch.
Thank you, Abel, and hello, everyone. All right, let's see what we have this week. So starting as always with the execution layer client. We have had a new release on Firehose Ethereum. So this is release number 1.4.2. This release brings an update to substreams to version 1.1.3 and includes fixing a bug that could have generated corrupted state files, fixing race conditions that would return a failure when multiple identical requests are back processing, plus additional fixes and improvements. What you need to know about this upgrade is that this upgrade procedure applies if your substream's deployment topology includes both tier 1 and tier 2 processes. So if you have defined somewhere in the config the value of substream's tier true, then this applies to you. Otherwise, you should ignore the upgrade procedure, and the upgrade procedure is one, you'd first deploy and roll out tier 1 processes first, and then you'd follow by deploying and rolling out tier 2 processes. Thank you, Matthew, for saying that you have it installed and it's working fine. And just one more thing about the upgrade. So this is important because if you upgrade in the wrong order, or if you somehow upgrade tier 2 first using the new protocol without tier 1 being aware, user will end up with backend errors saying that some partial files are not found. So yeah, please be aware when you're upgrading to the new version of Firehose ETH. We have also had a new release on Nethermind. This release is a high priority release for 𝗨𝗂𝗲 network operator because of the upcoming 𝗨𝗂𝗲 hard fork. And for all other chains, this is a low priority update recommended for those syncing from scratch only. And one more comment from Matthew. So the new release of Firehose is running on Ethereum mainnet, BSC, Polygon, Girly, Sepolia, Rinkerby, and Mumbai. That's a lot of chains, and it's amazing that it's working on all of them. Thank you for providing us with that information. We have also had a new release for Arbitrum Nitro. This release is version 2.1.0 Alpha 2, And this release adds support for custom chain configurations, including L3 chains, compared to the previous alpha release. And that's all we had on execution layer client. Moving on to consensus layer client, we have had a new release of Prism. This release contains a lot of important improvements and bug fixes since the previous release. And these fixes relate to improvements to attestation aggregation. And this release is strongly recommended for all users. And I just dropped a link for people to read more about the improvements to attestation aggregation. We also have a new release on Nimbus. This is release 23.5.1, a medium urgency release improving the compatibility of Nimbus with third-party validator clients and beacon nodes, introducing the support of incremental pruning. Again, medium urgency, and it seems to relate mostly to validator clients. We have a new Lighthouse release, version number 4.2.0, medium priority release for all mainnet users, and it contains some improvements to the resilience of Lighthouse. However, there is no immediate urgency to upgrade. So if you're gonna leave one behind, this is fine to leave behind. Okay, and moving on to the last part, which is GraphStack. We have had 2 new releases on POI radio. So this is release number 0.3.0. So some changes on attestation result ratio string query, improvements to state persistence, added configurable logger format, and splitting concurrent events for shorter length of mutex logs. And then we also have version 0.3.1, and this is just a refactor of updating the logging levels. And that is all I have this week. Any comments from anyone else? Okay, Matthew is confirming that he has upgraded POI radio to 0.3.1, so latest release. And we don't know yet how it's working because it was done so soon. Thank you, everyone, and over to Johan.
Thanks, Anna. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Awesome. Cool. So getting into Protocol Watch, we have first a few posts for forum governance. One is for GIP 46. This is L2 transfer tools. There's a small clarification by Pablo regarding whether delegation and curation needs to be moved separately from the subgraph migration and indexer migration. And this is, of course, due to the complexity of bundling stuff and possibly having all of those state transfers fail at the same time. So yes, it's independent. Both indexer and delegation migration are independent, and subgraph and signaling are independent. Next up, we have timeline and requirements to increase rewards in L2. There's basically some clarifications regarding the state of the transfer tools. Currently, it's being worked upon. There are a few things that need to be polished for the UI, and we are still testing the contracts, but everything's looking good. So it seems we're still on schedule. Then we have forum research. We have a thread by Craig regarding Web3 data pipelines using subgraphs with file data sources. This is basically a blog post on how to do those things. So if you want a little bit of more context, you can read the blog post. It's linked in the agenda, or actually in the forum post, which is linked in the agenda. Getting into the contracts repository, we have, again, as we mentioned previously with the L2 transfer tools update, we have a bunch of PRs regarding testnets. This is basically just internal testing for all of the L2 transfer tools in different configurations, and as well as a fix for one of the bugs that we discovered during testing. And getting to network subgraphs, we don't have any new releases, but we're working on having those releases for the L2 transfer tools done. They're actually being tested, so as long as there's no new updates that we need to take care of, it's technically going to be the same code. And that's pretty much it for Protocol Watch. So I'm going to hand it over to Abel now.
Wonderful. That was pretty short as far as Protocol Watch and Repo Watch, so appreciate that there. So as I mentioned to some of you at the beginning of the conversation before we started, today is pretty light on agenda, so we're going to go for another one of these free-form open discussion type conversations. And the floor is open. So if anyone has got any ideas or topics that they'd like to discuss with the rest of the group, or anything that people would like to explore together while we're all in the same call right now, please do share, because this is a fantastic opportunity to ask your fellow indexers anything that you desire. So yeah, anyone have any questions, thoughts, ideas that they'd like to share? So Anna asked the question, when will the data on the number of rewards be known in relation to MIPS? That is a question that I can direct to Pedro, who's on the MIPS team. I don't have that particular information right now, but what I can do is, yeah, MIPS is done, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So, Nick is here. Nick, and he just unmuted. Would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, so I can't give any formal information about the rewards because I don't own that part of the program, but we are working on a communication to all MIPS participants that will formally announce the conclusion of the program and also provide some next steps. I think the MIPS agreement specified that all participants will receive their rewards. I'm trying to remember if the distribution was like...
It's 60 days from the conclusion of the program. So that is 60 days from Monday the 22nd is the latest that participants will receive their awards. And of course, we will try to process that as we go through the submissions.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you, Slim. There's some information that'll be coming out here soon with some forms that need to be completed for the community support elements of the program. But certainly want to acknowledge and congratulate everybody that participated in the program. I think, it was a difficult task. I mean, this is bleeding edge technology and these types of programs. I think all of us would really appreciate it if they were more streamlined and templated. And although I know there were mistakes made along the way, this was a heavy lift. And Pedro's not here, but he deserves a huge shout out for carrying most of this burden by himself. So I'm incredibly proud of what the MIPS program accomplished. I wish we could go back in time and iron out some of the things we came across. But I remember early on kind of sharing that observation with an internal team member saying, oh man, I wish, that mistake didn't happen or we didn't run into this problem. And the response was, hey, this is bleeding edge technology. We're doing new things here and building as we go. So everybody should have an appetite. And I knew I need to kind of reorient myself. So appreciate everybody's patience, everybody's commitment to the program, and congratulate everybody that took part in it. Huge shout out to Pedro and everybody else that supported the program.
Wonderful. I completely agree with everything that was said there. Yeah, there you have it. Okay, I see another question coming in. Testing Ethereum substreams powered subgraphs on 𝗨𝗟𝗂𝗟𝗃 mission is also finished. I believe so.
That's correct. Yep. So all missions are officially completed now. And like I said, I'm working with the team on drafting an email. We're going to try to get that out today or tomorrow. So there'll be some more information coming.
Wonderful. And I see some people typing there, just providing some additional context. Awesome. Okay, that's a question from Anna saying, we are interested in the plans and schedule for migration to Arbitrum 1. We want to get as much information on this as possible. So, yeah, if I'm understanding this correctly, we have this. Yeah, so if I'm understanding this correctly, yeah, there was a discussion on this at IOH. And we do plan on revisiting the topic in a future IOH very shortly, actually. Is there anything specific that you're looking for in terms of information that I can facilitate for you, or you just want general updates to be more frequent? I can also try and dig up the conversation that we had on this topic at IOH, if that's useful. Let me just go grab that now. 1 second.
As far as I can see from the post itself, the ETA that was provided to increase to 25% on L2 is already running late. As it says, ETA the week of May the 22nd, and I don't think that those points, the criteria is going to be met within this week. But it's not so further away, so to speak. It's still relatively close to being accomplished. We've been working basically with the UI and subgraph team, making sure that all of the transfer tools are being supported by the subgraph, as well as the UI being able to utilize the subgraph as well as the contracts. But I think one of the criteria that is gonna still delay this, I don't know for how long, but hopefully not that much, is the last point, which is transfer tools have been deployed for at least 1 week, and participants can confirm they are able to use them without major issues. So I would assume like at least 1 to 2 more weeks in the best case scenario, so to speak, because we still have to have them deployed for 1 week, and I'm not entirely sure when they are going to be deployed to mainnet. We have been testing them for a long time, and making sure that everything works okay is, of course, difficult, as they are quite complex. But so far, I think we found a few bugs that have been fixed, and I think the changes have also been audited, so it's not gonna be delayed for that much longer, I think. But again, I'm not the one working on the contracts. I don't know if Pablo or Ariel are here, but yeah, that's still being heavily worked upon. So I would hope to have those things released shortly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Juan, for the update there. Yeah, I'm not sure. I was grabbing the link, so I'm not sure if you've also answered uh, Adroid. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. From SG Stake, he asked the question, timeline for possible transfer node to L2. Yeah, I was grabbing the link, so I'm not sure if you responded to that because it's related to
Well,
this.
it's kind of a part of the same question, I would assume. By
Yeah.
transfer node, I would assume they are discussing about like transferring an indexer, and that requires the staking transfer tool. So it's basically the same thing. So yes, it should be deployed relatively shortly, but I don't have an ETA on that as I'm not the one actually going to be deploying it. We have been heavily working on those things and testing them, so it shouldn't be that much longer. Hopefully ASAP, but I would not count on it being actually. So basically, the ETA of the week of May the 22nd to increase to 25% on L2, I don't think that's gonna be met because I don't think it's gonna be deployed today. Hopefully, very shortly, like in the next 2 weeks. Unless, of course, there's some major bug that we discover that unfortunately would cause another delay, but hopefully not.
Awesome. And I can reach out to Pablo today to get some further clarity on updates on deadlines and stuff like that as well. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Juan, and thank you guys for the questions on the topic. If you have any additional ones, let me know because I'm going to reach out to Pablo today. And then Mark Andre says, "Hey, I would like to bring up the topic of indexer support / developer access if you're up for it." Yes, we are up for it. But I would love some additional context if you have any as to what you're looking to get from that topic there.
Yeah, sure. So basically, what I noticed in the past couple of months is that access to developers to obtain support has never been more difficult. The vast majority of the developers and other operational folks at the various core teams do not necessarily participate to the community calls, including IOH. There are some exceptions. I see them here. Thanks for being here, but I think the mass majority do not, and they do not engage in Discord or the forum either. I watched the Who's Online sidebar is in Discord, and there's only a handful of names there at any time. And because of natural churn, I mean, there's new people coming in, some left. We don't know who they are anymore. We don't know their name, we don't know their role, they don't know us. So it's impossible to engage in any productive conversation. We're limited to transactional conversation when they come here to IOH to talk about the specific feature development, or after we've successfully convinced Payne to forward our questions to the internal Slack channels. That's a problem because collaboration between indexers and developers is essential for the quality of the network to improve software and improve the performance of the network. We cannot tune our stack or software if we don't understand, we're not able to understand its inner working. Maybe if the software stack was mature, we could go through some sort of support team, but the software is evolving very rapidly. There's major features. Major features are constantly being added. And to be honest, sometimes the level of quality of some of these software components requires frequent developer involvement. So anytime an indexer wants to build an infrastructure that goes beyond the very simple basic stack, or we need some details to tune performance, we need access to that expertise. And I'll give a concrete example, recent example. I did some experiment with DB sharding, was working fine testnet, and then I started deploying on mainnet, and then I started having several on-ends playing problem and issues, and then realized that no one on Discord was in the position of providing any sort of assistance. And I realized that I was deploying something without any possible access to any help. So I decided to stop doing that. And now sharding work is, I postponed it infinitely because that's way too risky. That's not something I can risk doing in production. And there's another relatively recent development is that now most core teams are running their own indexers. I think that's probably positive because now they're running the software in a relatively similar setting as the independent indexers. So there's like a short feedback loop between the developers and some of the users. But if that short feedback loop works so well, then maybe developers and will not necessarily feel the need to come to the community to solicit input or feedback when it comes to develop new features. And sometimes it's just a matter of prioritizing the issues and lobbying to get some GitHub issues to be solved in some timely manner. And there's also a secondary thing. I kind of have the perception that core teams have easy access to each other through internal channels and in-person meetings. So long term, that's only going to increase a gap between developers and independent indexers. There's even a danger of creating a gap between indexers supported by the foundation and the independent one. So, and I won't even go into the gateway because everything, as I mentioned, is 10 times worse when it comes to gateway. It's closed source. There's a complete absence of documentation, and somehow the dev team is even more difficult to access. So that's something I've been bugging me for a long time. I've been trying to raise this every time I have the opportunity, but we never really had a proper conversation about it. Maybe I'm reading the situation currently. Maybe I'm missing some important context, and I'd love to hear you tell me what your perception is. There's some car devs here. Maybe you can bring up some context about why things are like they are. Maybe some other indexers find a way to get access to this type of support. Maybe we need to put some new communication in place. So I don't know. So what are the other industry things? Should we be doing something about it?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. It's clear to see that you've thought a lot about this, so I appreciate you bringing this up and in a very careful and considered way. So first of all, I think in order to build any sort of software that gets some sort of product market fit and is used by a large amount of people, like you need user input. So if you feel like the input that you have for all of this software is not being considered, that's clearly a problem. So I appreciate you bringing that up. As far as like solutions as to how we can fix this, because it's very important. Let's see. So would you be open to the idea of potentially hosting having a core dev at any given interval, like say for example, like each core dev once every month or two comes on here and basically opens themselves up for any sort of like questions or something like this. Would that be useful? Or like I'm trying to understand like what we can do here at Index Office Hours to try and alleviate that. Obviously, there are things that these core devs need to do to ensure that your feedback is being well received, and maybe you can explore that. But I think immediately here, that is jumping out at me as something we can do straight away.
That's probably a good thing, and actually, I think it's already happening on a fairly regular basis, right? There's core devs coming. Usually, when they have new features, something to explain, then that's very positive. So and that's I guess part of it. But sometimes I cannot wait 6 months for next time. I don't know, the next time Luther will come talk about DB to come up with some obscure Postgres tuning database questions, right?
Right, of course. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, let me think on that, because I think, as core developers, we ought to, we ought to get a lot of feedback from you guys in order to develop the right software. So yeah, let me think about how to approach this, and maybe I can think with you further to get more specifics, and then I'll obviously reach out to core devs as well to get their perspective, because this is very important. We ought to get this sorted out, but I appreciate you bringing this up.
Well, that's maybe the question related to that, and to me maybe it comes from that. I think I had the perception there's a deliberate effort to make sure that core team members are not directly interacting with the general graph community. Am I wrong?
I've never heard of that. That sounds strange to me. Can you elaborate on that? That's
Well, why is no one on Discord?
I'm not sure. Many people have different reasons. But I think it's important to have a pulse on what the discussion is in Discord for sure. Yeah. Okay. This is an issue. I can see where you're coming from.
Sorry,
I
I
think
got slightly lost. Like, why aren't more core developers in Discord? That was the question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess some of us are, not all of them. For example, I am in Discord, but I'm not actively looking at Discord. I only kind of react whenever I'm tagged. So if you need, for example, my support, I usually get on Discord whenever I get tagged in something, because as you can imagine, we are swamped with things. But I would assume some others aren't actually doing that, and that's what you're meaning with not having core developers on Discord. Is that right?
Yeah, well, one, I think you're an example of a core developer that is accessible. I have a general idea of what you're working on, what's your specialty, what's your expertise, and if there's an issue related to something I know you're working on, I can tag you, and you'll give a proper answer in a relatively short time, and that's great. But there are other topics I don't know who to tag, and sometimes I have a pretty good idea who I should be tagging, but if I tag, I don't get an answer either.
Okay, I see. So the issue is more there are some areas of development within the graph that are not so clear as to, I don't want to say who owns them, because it's not something that really has a single ownership, given that, again, we are a lot of core developers from different teams. So but I understand that now that it's slightly obscure, in the sense of with so many core developers, it's hard to have an idea as to who to ask some of the questions, unless you're actually very in depth with those topics. I would say, for example, anything related to infrastructure, particularly database side of things, usually relates to Latter. Then we have the EBO, which Thiago sometimes can take care of the Oracle stuff. I can take care of the subgraph stuff. But I understand that there are many different parts of this giant engine, so to speak. And I think what Matthew is saying is possibly some solution, like having a directory of experts, or at least some way of knowing who are the most knowledgeable core developers in some of the key areas. I think that would sort of like alleviate this feeling, hopefully.
Yeah, I know that there was an effort to have some system where we have a bunch of triagers, so people who have yeah, kind of like a director of experts. I like that terminology. Who have a broad understanding of who, yeah, like Juan said, like who's working on what, and then are able to kind of yeah, triage the responses and get some sort of yeah, some sort of like response there. And there was also efforts to set up some sort of like Stack Overflow for these things. But I think, you know, my understanding about you, Marc-Andre, is that you're quite on the bleeding edge, and so a lot of the issues that you'd have, I'd imagine, I think they could still benefit from some sort of like Stack Overflow. But I think the issues you would face, you'd probably be one of the first to face them, and so you'd probably need, yeah. So
a good Discord archive will play that role, right? So usually when I encounter a problem, my first thing I do is I search in the Discord chat history looking for someone else, if they had the same problem or not. And if not, then I'll ask a question. I'll post the data that I have and I'll solicit an answer. But if there's not another index where I got a problem, that won't get me very far. And will often there will be quite advanced discussions that will happen in the Indexer channels, and we'll never get a proper answer because there's no one with the knowledge that hangs around these channels. So sometimes we don't get very far.
Hey, Marc-Andre. You and I know each other, so you know in a lot of ways I'm a little over my head here and speaking up on some of these technical issues and stuff. That being said, I think, the only Foundation member on the call today, and too bad for the Foundation because I'm just the marketing guy, right? But I do want to say a couple things, and again, you and I know each other, so you know I could only go so far here. But certainly there is no directive or policy that core devs should not be, you know, interacting and more active with the community. I think, you know, the implication is the opposite. I think there would be an expectation and a hope that the core devs are interacting a lot with the community. So from my perspective, you know, I think this is great feedback that we need to go back as a Foundation team and explore ways to encourage core devs to be more active in Discord. I think you're making valid points and it's important feedback. I do also want to say, in a broader context, this idea of providing, you know, quote unquote customer support, as we're all familiar with in, you know, legacy industries, is another challenge we're trying to address. And as I'm watching the chat with people making comments and supporting in what you're saying, Marc-Andre, but also adding new ones, you know, this is a challenge, and we're working on it at the Foundation level of how do we ensure that when people have questions in Discord, they get answered. And we are exploring these things, and we're committed to finding the answer. So I don't want to also say that these aren't things we're also thinking about and concerned about. And we need to do a better job ourselves for sure, but we also need to do a better job of like decentralizing it and bringing more people into the mix. And we are discussing those things. But I appreciate these points of feedback specifically, and I'm happy to take it back to the Foundation team. And like I said, I always appreciate your perspective, Marc-Andre.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I didn't want to say that there was it was on purpose to keep separate, but I think in practice, the way communication is organized, it creates a gap between the core contributor community and the indexer community, and that's probably not on purpose, but I think that's what's going on, and that's not great for the long term. more Discord involvement, that will certainly be a good thing. But maybe there's other stuff. I think Mike mentions a thing like a indexer support. That's we'll probably need something like that for the gateway. Sometimes the gateway just acts up and it doesn't work well, and there's absolutely no one we can reach to let them know or to get support. That's not something that's like dev team, but I suppose there must be some sort of operational team for the gateway. We should have a way to reach the folk at Edge and Node that manage that, but that's just another example. But there's several different things like that we're not able to get communication, message, provide feedback, or solicit advice. There's no channel at all we can use.
Yeah, yeah, this is an important question, and it's quite difficult. I remember discussion on this, so I will make it a thing to reach out to folks who I know were thinking about this problem and get an update, and I'll either report back here or message you personally, Marc-Andre. Somebody, I think it was Mike, mentioned the subgraph support crew, which I thought is interesting. Would you mind maybe elaborating on how that works? Okay, there are a few 6 to 7 different teams that make sure that we have time slots for watching Discord, answering questions.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, that is the subgraph guardians that I'm currently managing, and they have a setup with scheduled times to watch Discord. They have an escalation path with a directory of experts, and also we meet regularly or meet once a week to discuss challenges that have been seen in Discord the past week. And I would love to see something similar for indexer support as well. So thank you so much for pointing this out, 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗧, or Marc-Andre. It's definitely something that is being looked at, and it is a pain point that a lot of us that are frequenting Discord is seeing. So I would love to see more engagement with the core devs as well. But it might help to have somebody to triage the issues and help in between the indexes and the core devs as well. So yeah, that's the subgraph guardians, and like data nexus, 𝗨𝗪𝗂𝗪, Portafire are all part of that subgraph guardian team, and create a very broad coverage now on the subgraph developer side. So that's great to see.
Yeah, it's good to hear that there's good coverage there with so few people. Makes me think that there's not that many people needed to have some sort of similar coverage, or at least any sort of coverage for indexers.
Yeah, there's also contractors from the Graph Foundation that is working on it. So as well as people from Edge and Node. So we do have a broad coverage, but it's also it does require a bit of manpower. But yeah, I would love to explore that more. And even I think one of the challenges for core devs is that as the protocol grows, we have so many components and we have so many channels, and it is impossible for any core dev to keep on top of everything. So I think making sure issues are triaged and GitHub issues are opened, and that the right question goes to the right persons with the right expertise is critical to ensure that you have that two-way communication between core devs and indexers.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to look into this, and I will get back to you, Marc-Andre, and also Slim as well, because I know that you've thought about this as well. Yeah, this is really important. I appreciate you bringing this up, Marc-Andre. And yeah, rest assured, I will look into this, and get back to you on this, because yeah, I remember having a few discussions on this in the past. It is a big problem. I remember also discussing that it's difficult from the core dev side, in that Discord is hard to stay on top of, and like a lot of people tagging different core devs, and it's hard to kind of like ensure that all the questions get answered. It's a very complex problem, but I think there's definitely solutions we can leverage for sure to solve this. But yeah, let me get back to you guys on this, because I think it's important.
Yeah, I realized that having everyone in channels, we cannot ask everyone to be all of the time in a channel. That there's a lot of disruption, and sometimes the discussions can be um, overwhelming. So yeah, I don't necessarily have a clear solution myself either. Just that, yeah, I'd like to see the dev more. I'd like to be able to have a design discussion with them, and I'd like to be able to, I don't know, questions a few things in the architecture and ask them why they did it this way, and if that they thought to, I don't know, support slightly different architecture or use case, right? And that's not existing today. We're not able to have these discussions.
Well, this is great. And I'm sorry for cutting in there, but a foundation clearly cares about the indexer experience. We acknowledge we need to do better, and it is a focus. And the core development relationship with GraphOps, as well as some other initiatives that we're working on, is intended to do that. And so, I'm not necessarily tying a bow on this conversation, but just to kind of hit the nail on the head, Marc-Andre, this feedback that to improve the indexer experience, we should be mindful of more interaction and support from core devs is incredibly valuable. And like I said, it'll go directly back to the foundation team, and we'll get to work on it.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely important, and I agree. Let's see, before we wrap, if there are any other questions here. One sense of progress.
A few people are asking if there's any other incentive programs planned, and the answer is no. I think it's important just to kind of say that, since I can see a little bit of back and forth on that. But no, nothing planned right now. There's a lot of work to do on mainnet. I think we all understand that. And I'm excited to formally roll out the new program by which the community can add new chains to the network, which will be announced later as well. So we got a lot of work to do, and no incentive programs presently planned, but there's a lot of incentives to support the network on mainnet.
Sweet. Thanks so much. Cool. Well, any other question? Oh, thanks for bringing this up. Oh yeah, thanks so much, Mike. Yeah, thanks for bringing up the subgraph example. I think that's a good model that could potentially be leveraged here. Yeah. Any additional questions on any topics before we come into the final 10 minutes of today's conversation? A few people typing. Knock knock. Is that a knock knock joke? State machine. Just to answer the question there, Alex, we spoke about this earlier, but it's supposed to be. We spoke about this earlier in relation to MIPS. MIPS has concluded. There will be some official communications coming out very shortly from the foundation as to what the next steps are. So hopefully that is useful. I'm curious. Steak machine. Follow up. Oh, finish the joke. There we go. I'm biting. Who's there? No worries. Cool. Well, we have a final 6 minutes. Let's see if we can try to squeeze in another topic, question, thought, idea. Remember, this is a period where we're all together, and if you have any, burning desires, questions, anything, we'd love to hear them. Good example is what we spoke about with Marc-Andre. I'm keen to look into that further and get back to him on that. So if you guys have any additional questions, please do shout. Alrighty, well, I'm going to take that silence as a no then, and thank you all for attending today's edition of Indexer Office Hours. I appreciate the discussion and the feedback. It's super important. I think it's important to have these kind of free-flowing conversations every so often where there's no particular agenda, just so we can cover topics like this. So I appreciate everyone coming along, and I wish you all a fantastic rest of your days, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, Tuesday, same time. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.